Tonight, I am going to be continuing from the book Preparing to Die by Alexander Holecek. And I am starting on page 37 of his book, titled A Preparation for Sudden Death. Now, this surprised me. He says 1 out of 10 people will die suddenly and unexpectedly. Now, personally, it was the death of my best friend in an accident in Menominee that brought me to the Dharma. And I have lost a number of other friends suddenly and unexpectedly, and perhaps all of you have had similar experiences. So what he suggests is, if you find yourself in that situation, bring your awareness to the top of your head, meaning this part of the head, and recite Om Mani Padme Hung. Om Mani Padme Hung is a great mantra for almost any situation. I can't think of a situation where it wouldn't be a good mantra. But anyway, bringing your awareness to the top of your head, in Vajrayana, we have subtle body, and we want our attention to be brought to the top of our head. And this facilitates consciousness leaving through the top of the head, which is ideal. And Chenrezi's mantra includes in it compassion for the 6 realms of samsara, and then this closes the door to the 6 realms of samsara. So in a way, it's like a transference of consciousness to Dewa Chen. It isn't exactly, but it's close. So you can also visualize Karmapa, Khenpo Karta Rinpoche. You could visualize anybody that you wanted above your head. You don't have to be perfect, first of all. That's a very important point. Perfection is great to aspire to, but none of us are perfect. So don't be hard on yourself and just cry out to your teacher for help the best that you can. And it's good to practice Chenrezi's mantra anytime. You can say it when you're driving, when you're mowing the lawn, during commercials, if you're watching cable or something. You got to get used to it. You can watch the news and say it. It may be a very good time these days to connect with his mantra and make it a habit. He says that if you receive sudden bad news, say the mantra. In other words, you're training your mind so that when something surprising, shocking, frightening happens, that you'll say his mantra. He even says when your lover tells you he or she is leaving you. As a monk, I don't have to worry about that. But if you have a friend that died, say it. It says, if you get fired, the important thing is to be aware of how you react to situations, shocking and surprising, where your mind goes. And that this is a way to see how you are doing, how ready you are for sudden death. And I'm not going to discuss, and he does not discuss POA much here either. We'll do this at a later time. There's so much in this book, little by little. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. So the next section here is the noble truths. He's not talking about the Four Noble Truths. What he's saying is that Buddhism does not sugarcoat things, that it tells the truth. In this case, it means that the bardos are both a time of danger and they're a time of opportunity. The opportunity is if you let go and relax, you can pass through the bardos easily. The danger is if you panic, you can have very bad outcomes. You could have a poor human birth or a birth in a lower realm. He says to avoid ignorance of the bardos, but then don't stress out. That stressing out won't get you very far. So here's a little incident that happened to me. It was Monday. I'm getting physical therapy for my neck, and it is improving. You may not notice this, but it's improving. At least that's what I think. And I have these various Buddhist objects hanging on my neck, a lot of them. So I pointed out this one and I said to him, I'm wearing this because you are to have this on you when you die, and you never know. And it kind of surprised him, the physical therapist, that, someone would think that way, as opposed to, oh, it's not going to happen. That's what he's talking about being noble, that the Four Noble Truths describe reality, if you look at it. And the Bardo teachings are the same thing. They describe reality. And even though it might be producing some anxiety, he describes it as, quote, wholesome fear. This is why these four reminders are important, that they make us a little bit anxious to practice. And the Buddha's parinirvana is to encourage people to go beyond laziness. It's very important to not become lazy and think, oh, well, I can put this off until later on in life. When you get to be my age, later on in life, there isn't much later on in life. For those of you that don't know this, I'm going to turn 80 in May. My pacemaker says it's got 5.5 years of average battery life. Now I can put a new I can hire someone to put a new pacemaker in. Let's put it that way. I was going to say I can put a new pacemaker in, but I can authorize putting a new pacemaker in. But it really makes me aware of how fragile life is and how fleeting it can. Getting back to the Bardo, there's a lot of emphasis placed on the thoughts that you have as you are dying can have a very strong influence on your next life. So it's good to have positive emotions, sacred feelings, to have love, compassion, devotion, that these are very powerful. And if you can have these when you are experiencing a sudden death, the best that you can, that is very good. So cultivate these feelings when you're alive, when things aren't so tough. Develop a habit of these kinds of thoughts. So he says we should do all that we can to inspire these emotions. It's good to have this positive frame of mind. If we become depressed or upset, that can send us the wrong direction. And we want to avoid fixating on negative thoughts. Be motivated by the fear of death and understanding the law of karma. And of course, he brings up Milarepa at this point that, well, Milarepa killed 35 people when he was young. And he realized that this meant some pretty serious karmic implications. So he practiced and endured very, very difficult hardships. But he ended up purifying his karma, attained liberation, and became famous throughout Tibet. And he is one of the lineage masters mentioned in the Mahamudra lineage supplication. So here's a quote by Milarepa. In horror of death, I took to the mountains again and again. I meditated on the uncertainty of the hour of death, capturing the fortress of the deathless, unending nature of mind. Now all fear of death is over and done. So the point is that we have our own karma to purify, and we can benefit from exerting ourselves and being motivated to exert ourselves with this, quote, wholesome anxiety. Compared to, let's use something from the 60s, compared to freaking out. I think you all know that, even you younger people. He then talks about how sometimes these teachings are diluted. One of the KTD translators was out here. His name was Chujor. Some of you may remember Chujor. I remember him saying out here to me, one of the functions of the Lama is to encourage the student to do more than they would on their own. To put it in Western terms, sometimes the Lama is a motivational speaker. It's important then to not be complacent, to encourage yourself to do more and to be prepared. Very simply, either we take control of our destiny or karma takes control. And up until the present, karma has been in control, and here we are. We were around in, I'm not sure what form for each of us, but we were around at the time of the Buddha. And we were around in times of previous Buddhas, and we're still not enlightened. But we're in a very good place, and that's very, very important. So, getting back to how Buddhism relates to the truth, Dharma, which means the teachings of the Buddha, also means the truth, and it can also mean to straighten. So, this is my take on to straighten. It is our job to align ourselves with reality, not to align the truth to our version of reality. I remember giving a talk once and saying that it's about, you're kind of like a car where you give your car a front end alignment. You're giving your mind an alignment. Turned out one of the people that I was talking to was an auto mechanic, and he immediately got it. He understood a front end alignment. So there are three quotes here, one from Alan Wallace. Your future lives will not be like ducks in a row. Present life, chaos. Future lives, chaos. due to a hodgepodge of karma, mental afflictions, and habitual propensities accumulated in the past. And then he quotes Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. Beings with consciousness have a vast number of karmic patterns abound, lead to rebirths in any of the six realms. Our minds are unstable and we are not always agitated, bored, or aggressive, nor are we continually joyful and stable. We are continually colored by these changing karmic patterns. Our different births are determined by whichever karmic patterns predominate at the time of rebirth. And then Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is about people in the West being fascinated with that book. He talks about it's a way to, well, he looks at how bizarre Western funerals are. My first job right after getting out of high school was working at my grandmother's funeral home. Just happened to have a grandmother that was a funeral director. And so I saw this firsthand. Part of my job was going to the hospital morgue and picking up a body. The Tibetans would say a corpse. And then you bring it back. And of course, I didn't do any of the embalming, but you embalm it. And there is a color in the embalming fluid. It replaces the blood. And wrinkles disappear. The cheeks become colored again. And a good compliment to a mortician is, well, she looks better dead than she did when she was alive. And I'm serious about this. And this seems very bizarre. So a lot of Westerners would read the Tibetan Book of the Dead and see it as a kind of a way to hack, to use present language. Somehow or another, you can come back and be reincarnated and cheat karma. And of course, that doesn't work. And embalming people to make them look like they're better dead than when they are alive, that doesn't work. The quote that he has here is, you are going to continue. You have your karmic debts to work out and your friends to come back to. Maybe you will come back as my child. Nobody stopped to consider that they might come back as a mosquito or a pet dog or a cat. He also said, and I don't think this is in the book, that death is the real pornography in the West. It's a subject that nobody wants to talk about in polite society. Sex, no problem. You can talk about that all you want. Then he mentions, if this doesn't convince you, then keep this in mind. There are 100 deities in the bardo. 52 of them are wrathful. Only 48 are peaceful. And the wrathful ones can be quite frightening. And so maybe the reason for this is that we need more fear, wholesome fear. So that he sums this up by saying reality is the essence of Buddhism. The next is devotion. It begins with a quote, real devotion is an unbroken receptivity to the truth. Real devotion is rooted in an awed and reverent gratitude, but one that's lucid, grounded, and intelligent. So devotion is this totally open heart. It is central to the Vajrayana path. And it's essential or a key preparation for navigating the bardos. It is not an abdication of our responsibilities to ourselves. It's not blind faith. It's not just following another personality or a whim. Here's a quote by the Buddha. It's only through devotion and devotion alone that you will realize the absolute truth. So devotion, to go into it a little bit more, again, it opens our heart. It's a gesture of surrender, and it opens us up to blessings. It's dropping resistance, and it's letting go of attachment to one's self. He quotes here, Anam Tupten. Self is gone the moment our heart is completely taken over by the spirit of devotion. Now, devotion usually comes little by little by little. This is an important part. You don't give up common sense. You don't give up your wisdom. But if you follow a teacher, if you have a guru, and now we're talking about Vajrayana here, gradually, if you have a productive relationship, you will start seeing your Vajra master differently and start seeing how powerful the presence is. I think that's a good way to put it. But it's really how you relate to the Vajra master. So the devotion is very, very, very important. Speaking for myself, my guru was Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. And through him, I met many others, Tai Situ Rinpoche. I met Jamgon Khantrul III one time in Toronto, Canada, by the way. And he just glowed. That's all I can say is he just glowed. And very impressed with Tai Situ Rinpoche. Rangu Rinpoche came into our retreat, and I met him a number of times after that, received teachings from him. Tai Situ Rinpoche gave me my novice vows. Rangu Rinpoche gave me my full monastic vows. And all of these people, at least myself, I could sense at a very deep level that they were not ordinary, that they were very special beings. So pay attention. You might say pay attention to your heart and how you feel about the teachers you have, and especially Vajra masters. To go on here, the three best things we can do when we die are rest in the nature of your mind. This is formless meditation. Resting in the Dharmakaya if you can. And a Vajra master, if you're ready for it, will give you pointing out instructions. And these pointing out instructions will help you experience this formless meditation of the Dharmakaya. Second thing you can do is Guru Yoga, and this nurtures devotion. Poa is a third one, and again, you might say, kick this down the road a little bit. Wait till we get to it at a later time. So Guru Yoga is mixing your mind with the Guru's mind. And so there's an element of devotion there. So he says here, if you cry out from the bottom of your heart, enlightened beings instantly respond. So crying out for help if things are out of control, if you don't know what to do. So I'm going to tell a personal story here. I worked from 2003 to 2011 as a prison chaplain. It was a totally different job for me. I was doing construction, working for a contractor before that. And I think about a year and a half after starting, there was an inmate who had a family member die, and his mother came in with a video so that she could watch it with her son, the funeral video. So I went up to the front gate where the guards then passed the woman through the metal detectors, except she was in a wheelchair. So they used the hand scanners like you see in the airport. And she was approved to come in. And so I then pushed her wheelchair back to the building where I work and where we would see this video. Soon as I entered the building, all hell broke loose. I was surrounded by guards, and the guards were panicking. And I'm going, what? But it's only inside that I'm doing that. Well, it turned out that she had an oxygen tank on her for her to help her breathe. And in prison, an oxygen tank is considered an explosive device. You're not allowed explosive devices in prison. And so there was a big fuss about this. I had never experienced this before working there. And in about an hour and a half, it was 4:30, and I got in the car and I drove home. Well, it's an hour and 45-minute drive home. And I'm going on the way home, Karmapakeno, 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 almost the whole way. Well, when I get home, my voicemail light is blinking. I push the button, and it is Lama Yeshe. This is Bardo Toku Rinpoche. Is everything all right? So I recommend saying Karmapa Keno if you get in a tough place. I told him what had happened, and he said, you've got to follow the rules. He said he would pray for me. And there was an investigation, and then I was called into the director of security office. And this is what he said. It's been a comedy of errors, which is a Shakespearean play. And nothing was put on my record. It was like the whole thing just evaporated. So I recommend saying Karmapa Keno. So now from here on, we're going to get into more esoteric material. And it's, in his words, it's a rich array of practices, and that you don't have to know all of these. It's a matter of presenting these things so that you can find the right practice. And last week, it was suggested that maybe we come up with a list of things to even narrow this down, what might be more appropriate for people that are practicing and affiliated with KTD and what's going on in your center and so forth. So it's better to focus on a few practices than try to spread yourself thin. Now, the next chapter is the bardos and the trikaya, the three kayas, or the three bodies. And these are related to the three stages of dying, death, the bardo of dharmata, and then rebirth, the bardo of becoming. So the Dharmakaya is the truth body. It is formless. It's the absolute. It's beyond description. And it's the essence of mind. So to quote here, it mainly refers to the empty, cognizant, and uncompounded aspect of one's mind. Primordial mind is a good description of that. It manifests in the relative world in form so it can benefit others. But because it is formless, others aren't aware of, at least unrealized others are not aware of it. So the two form bodies are the samboghakaya and the nirmanakaya. The samboghakaya is called the enjoyment body, or the body of complete enjoyment. And this is a physical form made out of light that only bodhisattvas on the 10 bhumis can see. And there are a lot of stories about bodhisattvas having visions of samboghakaya deities. The practices that we do, Chenrezi is a samboghakaya deity, Tara is a samboghakaya deity, Vajrayogini, and so forth. All of these are samboghakaya deities. And then the nirmanakaya, this is the emanation body, and it's the display of the mind. And this is communication of the Dharmakaya through physical form, usually through the form of a human being. So these are, he says, three levels of reality, from complete formlessness, the Dharmakaya, to completely formed, the nirmanakaya, and then everything in between is the samboghakaya. And the Dharmakaya is the most spiritual, the nirmanakaya is the least spiritual. Now, I'm going to throw in dharmata, and that is the innate nature of phenomena and mind. To go on with this, then, these three kayas, the analysis using the three kayas, help us organize these experiences that we go through in the bardos. And we can be liberated in any one of these three. And they are equal in terms of their level of realization. Recognition at the end of the bardo of dying results in liberation at the level of the Dharmakaya. The bardo of dharmata, that's when these deities appear, peaceful and wrathful deities. Recognition in that bardo results at liberation at the level of the samboghakaya, because you realize that you are the deities that are appearing, that they are your mind. And then recognition at the bardo of becoming results in liberation at the level of a nirmanakaya. And there is a table in there. So it basically says the same thing that I just did here. On the table, you've got kaya, then you got dharmakaya, samboghakaya, nirmanakaya, and then manifestation, formless, ethereal, form, and then opportunity for recognition, end of the bardo of dying, during the bardo of dharmata, during the bardo of becoming. And here, Buddhahood is defined as the full recognition of the three kayas. They are who we really are, our essence. It's the Buddha within. You could say that death is a journey through our mind, discovering our Buddha nature and the three kayas. There's a book by Trungpa Rinpoche, I believe it's called Journey of the Mind. Really, that's what goes on. It is your mind that goes through these three bardos, your body, you leave it behind. So very simply, if we recognize these enlightened aspects when the opportunity comes up, we're liberated. So that is what he talks about with the three kayas. So now comes the Dharmakaya and formless meditation. This begins on page 45 of his book. When the bardo of dying ends, you leave your body behind. There's no more sensory input. The physical obscurations are gone. Form is gone. You've entered the formless realm of the Dharmakaya, the nature of mind, Dharmata. Another word is clear light mind. That all of this is revealed, and it's so intense, on the other hand, that most people can't take the intensity and they pass out. Their consciousness passes out, blanks out. But this is where you have this opportunity of the mother and child luminosities uniting. The child luminosity is what we develop, the recognition that we develop in our practice while we are alive. So if we have developed a recognition of the nature of mind, even if it's relatively weak, if there is some recognition, it's this child luminosity. And then in the Dharmakaya, the mother luminosity arises, which is much more powerful, much, much more powerful. Maybe, I don't know if this is a good example, but I'm going to use it. The difference between a light bulb and the sun. They both emit light. They both radiate light. So if you can recognize this child luminosity when you are practicing and alive, you have this chance of recognizing the mother luminosity. And this is called the mother and child reunion. So the length of your stability, of your recognition, it says it's not set, that there are different lamas give different answers to that. And Padmasambhava said, an instant is all that's necessary for that recognition, for you to be liberated. I once heard a Canadian translator say, if you ask 12 lamas one question, you get 13 answers. There are different answers here to how long of an instant does the recognition need to last. But presently, our minds are covered up by our karma, our habitual patterns, our clinging to a self. They're attached to our physical body. And this keeps us from seeing things more clearly. And when our mind is released from the physical body, we're separated from matter. We don't have this material support. And there is an element of independence. There is this opportunity and possibility of recognizing it. We really need to have pointing out instructions from a Vajra master. to help us recognize this and then become more and more familiar with the experience. Then recognize it in the bardo, attain enlightenment. So what keeps us from experiencing this in the bardo is that we keep clinging to this idea of a self. And ego doesn't want to become irrelevant. Ego doesn't want to be left behind. So we have to give up this ego clinging the best that we can, or self clinging. Ego is a Western word. Self clinging. The Karmapa in, I think it is, one of his books talks about the fabricated self. And I think this rings true to Western thought, the way Westerners think. And the idea is that we have this conception of who we are that we fabricate from experiences, ideas, and thoughts that we get from all around us. When we're young, we're given a name, and we gradually are trained to feel that that name is me. And then we take on information, clues that other people tell us about ourselves. And then, of course, come the terrible twos, and we start establishing our own territory. I like this, I don't like that, I'm hungry, and I like this kind of food, and I don't like that kind of food, and on and on and on. And gradually, as we grow up and mature, we get a more solid idea of who we are, our likes, our dislikes, what we want. And we think that's who we are, but it's fabricated out of parts and pieces. And as we get older, we think that we're not changing, but we do change. And I go down the list. You've got early childhood psychology, you've got childhood psychology, you've got teenage something or another. I don't know what it's called. And then you've got adult psychology, and then you've got midlife crisis psychology, and then you've got geriatrics and hospice psychology, and probably 20 other categories in between. And it's because we keep changing as we progress through life. And this is all fabricated. Fabricate means to put together from parts. And another definition of fabricate that I like is to fabricate evidence, like in a trial. So it has this idea of not only being fabricated from parts, but it's false from the beginning. So we have to let go of ego. That is the biggest obstacle to attaining realization in the bardo. This means renunciation. And renunciation happens when you finally realize the futility of the worldly path and realize that only the spiritual path will lead to lasting happiness. Mahamudra Tregcho from the Nyingma tradition, luminosity yoga, the completion phase of deity yoga, emptiness, as is in the Prajnaparamita Sutra, and so forth. All of these will help recognize this child luminosity. So then we've got the samboghakaya, and the chapter or the section is samboghakaya, deity yoga, and thogyal. So recognition in the bardo of dharmata means realizing that what you see and hear is your own mind. It's nothing more than your own mind. This then again is liberation in the samboghakaya. Thogyal is in the Nyingma tradition, and in the other is generation stage of deity practice or deity yoga, guru yoga. So here you're visualizing yourself as a deity. When we do Chenrezi, we visualize ourselves as Chenrezi. And then you recite the mantra of the deity. You become accustomed to imagining yourself as the deity, and you have these different visualizations. But then comes the completion stage, which is at the end of the mantra, you rest in non-thought as best as you can. And as soon as a thought arises, then you visualize all beings and yourself as the form of Chenrezi, the samboghakaya. Whatever sounds you hear, pleasant or unpleasant, the sounds of the six-syllable mantra, Chenrezi's mantra, and whatever thoughts arise in your mind, they are the thoughts of the stainless Dharmakaya. So that is how this can help understand and navigate the bardo of Dharmata when the deities appear. And I'm not going to talk about Togel. It's too advanced, I think, for all of us. I've never had instructions in it. And one thing Khenpo Rinpoche told me was don't talk about what you don't know. So I am not going to talk about it. But that reminds me of a story about Khenpo Karta Rinpoche, and this was in retreat. And I can't remember exactly what practice it was. Could have been Chakra Samvara, good enough. And he would give extremely detailed instructions on every line in these practices that we did, these main practices. And he got to this one section and he said, I've never had instructions on this section, so I'm not going to give any. Just do it. To go on here, to move on, Khenpo Gangshar taught a less risky version of this. And when Lama Karma was here, he was talking a little bit about Khenpo Gangshar. Trungpa Rinpoche was a student of Khenpo Gangshar. Trangu Rinpoche attended teachings that Khenpo Gangshar gave, and I know Khenpo Kartar attended teachings that Khenpo Gangshar gave. And Khenpo Gangshar was a crazy wisdom yogi. So this is the instructions that he gave, and it is to practice closing your eyes very tightly and clenching your teeth. Then pressing your fingers on your ears. And you would do this, of course, alone in a quiet environment. And eventually you'll start hearing sounds coming from inside. And so these are the sounds of Dharmata, the sounds that you would hear in the bardo of Dharmata. And so you might say, get used to these sounds that naturally occur. And then you would close your eyes, and he says, be careful. Don't want to cause harm to your eyes or your ears, but press a little bit on your closed eyelids. And again, clenching your teeth. And eventually, colors and lights will manifest. So again, rest in these appearances, get used to these appearances. Quote, the utterly empty forms that don't exist anywhere, neither outside, inside, nor in between, end quote. So get used to those, and then at the time of death, when these appear, you'll recognize these sounds, colors, lights as your own self-display, and you are liberated. And I put in bold print, it's not mandatory to press your fingers on your eyelids or to plug your ears. Do be careful. Don't hurt yourself. Anyway, to explain this, at the time of death, the eyes quit functioning. So this natural radiance of Dharmata will arise. And it's intensely bright light. It can be extremely bright. They talk about the sound as being like the sound of thousands of thunderclaps all at once. So if we can get used to it now when we are alive, we can realize that there's nothing that can be established as real. We don't have to be frightened of these, and we will be liberated. Now, the sound of Dharmata, that's related to mantra repetition also. And so again, there is this interrelationship of these different practices. So to do this practice, he says, rest your mind. To meditate, rest your mind in samadhi as free of thoughts as possible. Clench your teeth and then plug your ears or close your eyes and just see or hear what happens. And just listen to it. Don't alter it. Don't make any judgments about it. Contemplate that there's no object to be afraid of, nor any sound that can harm you. By doing this repeatedly, then your fear of loud sounds in the bardo will diminish. He also says it's good to study statues and tankas of these deities to get used to how they appear, especially the wrathful ones. And he mentions llama dances. Here in this country, it's unusual to see a llama dance, but over in India, Tibet, Nepal, they happen all the time. And there are videos of them, and they'll have costumes on, they'll have masks, wrathful masks, peaceful masks. The idea is to become familiar. This will be of great benefit when you are in the bardo.